Hey everyone, it's Mattowarrior's Metal Madness, the third episode, and this will hopefully be a really interesting analysis of a really troublesome decade for heavy metal music, and that is the 90s. But first, it's time for some news. So sorry about that cheesy news music. I'll probably have to look at it. I just think it's funny. So let's see what's going on in the metal news right now. Ghost Tobias Forge. I always try to write songs I've never written before. Yeah, sometimes. I do like some of Ghost, so not to bash them. That's how I actually got into one of my favorite movies, Zardos. Is like one of their guitarists was on this record store show. What is it called? In LA, and he's talking about his what's in my bag or whatever. He was talking about Zardos, and I got in that. I love that movie. I bought it. Richie Faulkner says situation between KK Downing and Judas Priest has been a bit of a shit show. Well, no shit. Just get him back. That's all you have to do. Former Machine Head Phil Demmel plays national anthem. Don't care. Slash is pretty confident he'll be in a new Guns N' Roses studio album point down the road at some point. Yeah, well, maybe. I'd like to hear all the unreleased Axl crazy stuff that came out, from 95 through 2008 or whatever. Or that didn't come out, I should say. It's got like 3 albums worth of material or something. I think some of that stuff's really good. I liked Chinese Democracy to some extent. So I just think Axl's like this weird, eccentric, crazy dude that does music. So I'm kind of like into that whole thing. And I liked some of the songs on Chinese Democracy. Last 3 songs I kind of were bored by, like the actual last 3 songs. Apocalyptica collaborates with Finnish rock legend Ismo Alanko, a new version. I don't even know. Never heard that. Lizzie Hale. I thought you were going to talk about Lizzie Borden. I don't care. Sorry. Nico McBrain performed Iron Maiden. I don't care. Queensryche shares previously unreleased photo of Todd Latour and Jeff Tate during the 2017 encounter at festival. Well, I'm going to say this about Jeff Tate. He's really kind of proved himself, reinvigorated his career the last 5 years. He was really kind of just going nuts 10 plus years ago. It's just like, in my opinion, I think he was probably going through some shit or some, kind of personal crisis, and that's why those albums were sucky and stuff. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big fan of his solo work, but he seems like a better guy. He was on that Avantasia, and his vocals were the best he'd done in years, and the performances he's doing now are definitely better than even early some of it I've heard. This is just anecdotal. Some of the performances I've heard him do the last couple of years, of the older Queensryche stuff, like Rage for Order stuff, have probably been better than stuff, at least since the early 2000s, live stuff I've seen. Late Pantera drummer, House, don't care. Okay, that's cool. It's not that so a lot of these things I say I don't care. It's just I don't know. I just don't find it that interesting. It's just kind of neutral. X-Death and Rick Ross performs Evil Dead with Incantation. Oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, this is bullshit. This is stupid as hell. Richie Faulkner says he probably would have been able to handle Judas Priest songs with only one guitar. I guess he could have gotten a looper pedal or something. I think it's just lame as hell. Whole idea of Judas Priest is 2 guitarists. Period. I think it's the dumbest thing ever to even have entertained that possibility. Halford kind of took the blame for that, but I don't know what the truth is. Ted Nugent shares new single, American Campfire. That's all I got to say. KK Downing, why I'm angry about not being allowed to rejoin Judas Priest. I'm not going to get into that drama. I already said what I had to say. I like the new KK Priest, by the way. I'm not a huge fan of Ripper Owens, but that one is one of his better works. I thought the Malmsteen stuff I really liked, too. He just wears too many Monster Energy drink shirt, or he wears too much Monster Energy swag sometimes to be taken as seriously. But I do like a lot of his vocals and stuff. I don't think he was a good fit for Priest, though, for various reasons. It's not all his fault. Slash featuring Miles Kennedy. I don't care. Metallica. Oh, Dirty Window. Okay, well, okay, whatever. Evanescence and Within Temptation. Don't care. Here we go. Foreigners, Mick Jones and Ian McDonald. Rest in peace, Ian McDonald. I'll tell you a story. I got really into the band Foreigner the last 3 years or so. I don't know what it was, and it kind of represents this relationship I had a couple years back now, too, because I was listening to Foreigner constantly. And, of course, I listen to King Crimson, too, so it's pretty sad. Ian McDonald, rest in peace. He was in King Crimson as well. So I listen to, like, just all the Foreigner stuff, especially this, like, greatest hits thing. I know it sounds lame, but that and the first album I really liked, and 4 I really liked. Head Games I didn't like as much. Double Vision I liked pretty well. But it was kind of this thing that I got into, and kind of reminds me of this period of time in 2019, honestly, because I was listening to it while I drove, like, had this long distance relationship where I would drive, 60 or 70 miles to see this woman that I was with. And I would listen to Foreigner constantly. Beast in Black as well and some other stuff too. But Skunk and Annecy, I haven't heard about them for a while. Ex-Megadeth guitarist Chris Poland and Dave Ellefson's sex video scandal. I thought he handled it pretty well. Well, I don't know. Creator, behind-the-scenes footage from making Hate Uber Alice video. I think it's an okay song. Sabaton pays tribute to Unkillable Soldier. Okay. Oh, Speedwagon. Okay, whatever. I'm just going through these, these are just news articles of Blabbermouth. Cannibal Corpse. Corpse Grinder disagrees with Chris Barn about the state of death metal. Scene couldn't be better. I think I agree with Corpse Grinder, because you can look at the glass as half empty or half full with metal or music, and a lot of music in general. And it seems like Chris Barnes has kind of been trying to troll people a little bit more lately. I think he probably feels bad for quitting Cannibal Corpse, because they're just like the biggest death metal band, one of the biggest death metal bands there are. And Corpse Grinder is like become like a meme, and they based Metal Nathan Explosion, I think, on him. Just like he's just kind of this guy, and Chris Barnes is just doing these like he's just like smoking like 5 bond hits, 5 bonds a day of pot, and recording these cover albums of 6 Feet Under. I'm just like, I'm not saying that he's terrible. I'm just, it's just like what. It's just like it sounds like a very stagnant career, move that he's had. So he could do better himself, Rush's moving picture for 40th anniversary and expanded reissue. Don't care. I'm sick of all these reissues. I'm sick of like 50,000 fucking reissues. Just get it over with. I do like these deluxe box sets that bands do, though. Like Pink Floyd did one. They did all these box sets. But these deluxe reissues of a remastering of a remaster of a remaster, Iron Maiden's 20th remastered album. What's wrong with the original remasters? Oh, we got to make money and keep them in print. Okay. The Castle reissues, speaking of Iron Maiden, the Castle reissues from the mid-90s were absolutely impeccably done, in my opinion, because you had these bonus discs that had all these weird songs, all these live songs that they never, released on a live album, or B-sides, or just like funny tracks and stuff. It was awesome buying those. Violence shares title track. I think they're okay. I haven't heard much. Stain. Why is Stain on Blabbermouth? I don't know. Whatever. I like the Police, by the way. Not the real Police, but a cab. No, I'm just kidding. No politics on this podcast, by the way. I'm just watch Breaking the Law. Whatever. Okay. Aerosmith. What is that? Oh, that's kind of cool. Rare and previously unheard rehearsal from 1971. Voivod. Looking forward to that new album. I guess they released a single video. Napalm Death video. I like Napalm Death. New Scorpions, which I actually was surprised by. So they released a single or video for Seventh Son. It's called Seventh Son, not Iron Maiden. 60th birthday of Cliff Burton. Wow, that's crazy. Corey Taylor. I'm just kind of going through these super fast. Corey Taylor. Sorry. Tesla's Brian Wheat connects with ex-Tesla guitarist Tommy Skeoch from first time in more than 15 years. Great guitar tandem team, by the way. I think they're underrated. Iron Maiden's Bruce Dickinson sings like a cappella version of Jerusalem, Washington, D.C. I don't care. Wolfgang Van Halen picks his battles when it comes to dealing with online detractors. I don't care. Trailer for Eddie Vedder's intimate conversation with Bruce Springsteen. Fuck Eddie Vedder. And this whole Motley Crue thing, want to comment on that a little bit. Continues to take pot shots on Motley Crue. And this is going to go into the discussion today on this podcast because this whole thing goes back a long time. And I'll tell the whole story coming up because I'm going to tell the whole story on this podcast. Yes's frontman, John Anderson, announced a spring tour, whatever. I've seen Yes actually 3 times. I had a former friend that was really into him. Let's see. What else we have? Disturbs David Drainman's streaming services like Spotify saved music. I guess. I don't know. I never stopped buying albums, maybe for a short period. Morbid Angel, this is an interesting one. This is a really interesting headline. Morbid Angel pulls out of Maryland Death Fest, says it will not play any shows in current climate. Let's look this up. I'm going to look at the comments too. This will be the last thing on the news section. Will not be doing Maryland Death Fest or any other shows in the current climate, so we'll let you know. Let you determine that however you see fit. Oh, wow. Oh, Deicide's playing Legion in its entirety. Wow, that's got to be cool. Okay. So who's in it? Oh, Steve Tucker's in it. I was trying to see if I see comments. Some of these browsers don't load the comments very well. I'm not on Facebook right now for the comments. So I guess I could go one way or the other about why they don't want to play. And without getting too political about this, I think it's related to the you-know-what, because it could go one or the other. One of them could be like, I'm so scared of getting infected, blah, 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 I don't want to do that. Or they could go the other way, like, I don't like the restrictions and all these things the fans have to do to get in, and, whatever. I don't even know if they, require, what they require at Maryland Death Fest, honestly, if they require just a test or what, but could check it out, actually. This is my opinion. I'm assuming it has something to do with that. I mean, unless they think, cancel culture is going to get Morbid Angel or something, I don't think they could. There's been a lot of controversy. I know it's Washington, D.C., right, or something like that. So they're probably pretty restrictive because those are some of the most restrictive places for the virus related stuff in the nation is on the East Coast. Let's see. It doesn't say anything. Baltimore, Maryland. I want to check it out. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised that's related to it, but let's see. Was that tickets? I'm gonna look. I'm just very curious. Very curious why they would cancel. Let's see. I'm gonna click on tickets. All right. Let's see what it says. Because depending on your personal opinions about this stuff, I'm gonna go. I don't know. Let's get a ticket and see what happens. May 26, 2022. Doesn't say anything so far. Most places are. I've noticed this thing about most places with the Corona restrictions. By the way, I do not want to talk about this on this podcast. By the way, I'm really regretting even bringing this up. Oh, okay. They just have this. They don't really say much about it. They say interaction with the general public poses an elevated risk. Cannot guarantee. Okay, they have this disclaimer. Hard to say, It doesn't. It looks like it's not limited. So I wonder what they mean by that. What they mean by the current climate. Maybe they have some beef with another band. I don't know. Who the hell knows, man? Things are so weird now. I'm just gonna say that. I'm just gonna leave it at that because I just wanted to know because I'm curious about what people's opinions are. Because I know that people go one way or the other with a lot of this stuff. I mean, I'm just going to say, like, you'll have a band, like, pull out of a tour and they don't explain it. It's just really interesting. Like, you'll have some musicians say, yeah, I'm not gonna tour. They don't say anything else. And then there's another guy that says, oh, I'm scared about the safety of my fans and all this stuff or whatever, you know. So it's anyone's best guess why Morbid Angel would, you know, cancel Maryland Death Fest. But I do like, and by the way, I do like Morbid Angel. Even I didn't like their newest album; it was very disappointing. But you know, I do like the Tucker period, though. I mean, I prefer David Vincent, but I do like the Tucker period. So I've seen Morbid Angel live once with Pantera, believe it or not. And that was it was a decent show, but the thing is, the Pantera fans were totally like, it was awful because the Pantera fans were so ignorant about Morbid Angel. They were like flipping them off, I think, and like they were just like making fun of them. It's like, what's wrong with you? You know, that's what really. We'll get to this in a second because that'll be a good transition into what I'm going to be talking about as I drink some coffee here. So, what happened in the 90s and why that bothers me so much still to this day is a really sad, long, sordid tale as far as what happened in metal. So this is how I see it. In the late 80s, people were starting to get sick of the whole 80s thing. You know, you had funk metal bands and like, you know, like people like dressing like, what are they like? They just like started to have like this back to the roots, back to the blues kind of thing. And, you know, you had all these types of, these types of bands. Jane's Addiction was getting big. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Fishbone. Ooh, actually, I like all three of them. But you had people where the college rock thing was kind of getting bigger, like actual like alternative, like all the they paved, you know, SST records and like other records like Discord records or whatever. They all paved the way for this whole thing in the early to mid 80s. But it was actually getting mainstream acceptance to some extent. So you had all these hair metal bands and all these thousands of bands that were around. So it really started in 1988 around that time when bands were starting to be like, oh, we don't need all this makeup, you know, like, you know, George Lynch and, or I think it was like, even like the last Dokken album, okay? You look at the pictures, they're not wearing as much. And this does have to do with how these things unfolded. You saw like George Lynch, you know, George Lynch did Lynch Mob, but that was like 90. But you had like Blue Murder, you know, you had Lynch Mob, Badlands, all these like shredders that were doing these bluesier kind of projects. And you had a lot more social lyrics coming into the mix, like less about partying, you know, maybe like even Dokken's last album, Back for the Attack, you know, Kiss of Death, you know, it was marginally about AIDS, HIV and stuff. And you had these bands starting to do this kind of stuff. Justice for All came out, Operation Mindcrime, you know, all these albums that had more of a social whatever, you know, you can call it whatever, political message or, you know, at least like exploration of topical things. So that's what happened at that point. And then bands were just starting to say, "Oh yeah, the environment is important and all this stuff." It was kind of a left. I'll put it as a left wing, you know, marginally left wing, as much as that might piss off some of the audience, but it definitely was. I mean, there was all the nuclear assault and like DRI and all these bands. They're starting to have like big MTV exposure around that time. And you had these political bands, this punk, you know, punk in metal, like the punk influence of metal was becoming very prominent. So people were already rebelling against glam and stuff like that. And I mean, Maiden did Seven Son, Priest had, you know, Ram It Down and then Painkiller. But it was kind of becoming this thing where the writing was on the wall, in other words, what was going to happen with heavy metal. Well, at least glam metal. Because MTV would play all these these power ballads by all these bands. And it was starting to get kind of trite and ridiculous. So I grew up in a town that's very liberal. It's a college town. Metal's never been like a huge thing here. And I got into metal in the late 80s. It was 1989. March of 1989 was when I got into heavy metal. I'm old as fuck, so. But I'm not as old as like some other commentators out there, like Ralph Vieira or someone like that. Sorry, no offense. Who I watch all the time, by the way. People like that, but or Pop Off or whoever the fuck, I'm not that old. But I got into March 1989. It was like I was 10 years old, and I got into Live After Death. That was the first metal album I owned, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to be a scientist or inventor anymore. I want to be a guitarist in a famous band, because that was just like the best thing I'd ever experienced at that point. I can go more into why or how I got into metal and stuff and what I got into, but I'm just kind of going this to lead to this other subject that I'm going to be talking about. So I was really into like the crossover movement, I got Megadeth, so Iron Maiden, Live After Death, Megadeth, Peace Cells, Justice, all these dubbed tapes from my brother, Maiden, Metallica, Judas Priest a little bit later, maybe that summer of 1989. 1989. I love this band, Nestor, by the way. You should check them out. It's a new band, or supposedly an older band, but I don't know if that's true. They had a band. Okay. Anyways, that's another subject. I'm getting off subject. But they have a song called 1989. Look it up. So it was, that was kind of what I got into, was like I bought the Suicidal Tendencies Possessed to Skate single, and then I bought, I had a skateboard. I was like into this like thrash punk kind of thing in 1989 and early 1990. And I was like, yeah, it was cool. It was rebellious and it was neat. I drew anarchy symbols on notebooks and stuff. I was really into all that. So started writing my first lyrics too. And then, it was cool. And I'd go to record stores and they'd have used metal albums and stuff. And sometimes they were pretty clueless about them because this is not a metal town, as I said before. And then occasionally they were just kind of snooty about it, because I asked for a Voivod album once at one of these record stores. They're like, you mean Richard Hell and the Voidoids? I'm like, no, Voivod. And I actually like both of them now, but years later I like both of them. But it was just it kind of pissed me off. So it was always really difficult. I was kind of an outcast. And then middle school hit. And after sixth grade is middle school, but I went to middle school, and I went to a private school for sixth grade, and it was the only time I went to this school. And it was kind of a small class, small group, and they're all cool and stuff. But then I went to middle school, and it was total culture shock, because at that point rap was starting to get in the mix. So basically, this is what happened. So through 1990, or from 1990 through 1992, people started to get into rap instead of metal, like kids that were teenagers or preteens. And it was starting to become less cool to like metal a lot of the time. And it was like, yeah, people still liked, like the Black Album came out in 91 and stuff, people liked that. But it's like, it started to become less cool to like metal in general. Rap became like the more like lower middle class or working class kids grew up around me. They started to get into more rap music. People just were like, yeah, rap. I like rap. I used to like that metal shit, but I don't like rap. Fuck you. Anyway, sorry. It was like one of those things that kind of became more prominent as time went on. It was kind of the wrong time to get into metal, as it was on the decline, obviously. If I would have gotten into metal, if I was like 10 years older and I got into 79, that would have been like the perfect, perfect time to get into it. And I probably would be in a famous thrash band by now, but it was kind of a weird time to get into metal. It wasn't the worst time to get into metal. I'll get to that shortly, but it was a weird time. So things were changing really fast. 1990 came and went. And, Danzig was big. And I got into Danzig and I met up with some friends from elementary school that I hadn't seen in years. And we were both in it, or a friend from elementary school. We were in, Misfits, Sam Hain, Danzig. We exchanged tapes and stuff. And I used to not take care of stuff as much. So I cracked his tape case because I was a weird kid. So I don't know. Just kind of accident. I don't know if I put it in my backpack or something. But then everybody was getting into, rap and hip hop, but also grunge came and alternative. So, the more middle class kids got into that. Now, and some rap too. I'm not trying to make this our class or even, or dare I even go there, race thing, because it's not even anything to do with anything like that. It's just, these are just the trends I saw. So the middle class kids got into more alternative kind of grunge kind of music, alternative, whatever. And I liked a lot of it, I liked Nirvana, I liked Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. Hell, I even liked Soul Asylum's hit album of the time. One of my first Columbia House CD. One of those people that are of a little bit of an older generation remember the Columbia House. You get 5 CDs for a penny or something. You had this subscription service. One of the first CDs I got was actual CDs I got because I was a little late. Was Soul Asylum's Grave Dancers Union, and I got Alice in Chains Dirt, and I was really into this stuff. But at that same time, you did have some metal bands that were still doing stuff like obviously Pantera, White Zombie, Metallica, Megadeth. It was kind of it was popular, but a lot of the stuff that I got into metal in the beginning, like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, stuff like that, that was becoming way less popular. And people still like the groove and some of the thrash bands, but even the thrash bands weren't as popular too, except for the big ones. So people were starting to kind of go a different direction. And also at the same time, you also had the extreme metal thing rising, which was very niche, fringe kind of thing, even when I entered high school. And that was kind of there was only a couple of people into that stuff. You knew who they were. There's actually literally 4 guys that were into death metal because they wore a lot of death metal shirts that they ordered from Relapse and Nuclear Blast and all that. And I was kind of I wasn't as into the death metal thing at the time. And then I was kind of I'm not going to go into too much of my adolescence in this particular episode. I will someday, but I was kind of I kind of separated the more political bands like Napalm Death and the satanic bands, which I guiltily at the time enjoyed, but I really got into Carcass and Napalm Death too. So it was I still liked metal. I still liked metal, even though I liked some alternative and grunge and stuff. But then I went to this. Then things were getting worse because metal was seen as this white, quote unquote, white trash music, and it was getting to be weird on MTV. Even it wasn't as weird 91, 92, 93 through 94. Less metal videos. Beavis and Butthead was one of the last bastions of metal on MTV, and it just started to be. People were associating metal with being an airheaded, druggy, delinquent that drove a Camaro and spit. To be fair, there's some truth to this because there was these kids that were wearing Metallica shirts that I knew, and they were kind of juvenile delinquents, and it was a cool thing to spit for some reason in the 80s. You would just spit because you were cool, it was this little weird thing, hock and a loogie, very strange. It was just kind of a cool thing to do if you were into certain scenes. And those were kind of the kids that were listening to metal. But by the time that The Chronic by Dr. Dre came out, or even some of the last releases by NWA and stuff, or even like OG Original Gangster, which I do like. I like all that. I do like all that stuff. Like I respect all that stuff. I'd say Ice-T is probably my favorite out of all that. But metal was kind of like it was passe to those same kids. So I was this kid that was just into this thing that was like already passe to some extent. And then there's these death metal guys who I was kind of intimidated by it because they were a little bit older and more experienced, if you know what I mean, in life. And it was kind of a weird time. I was kind of, I guess I consider like myself like Stewart or something from Beavis and Butthead in a way. Except I never liked Wiener, and I still don't. But then what happened, I had a friend. Well, we were like Beavis and Butthead, me and my friends and stuff, but in some ways. So what had happened after that was I went to this, so 93 and 94 came in, and just by then it was all over pretty much. I mean, you had this short period of time where like Carcass, Napalm Death, Entombed, all the like Earache Records bands were like co-opted by Columbia Records. Or they were like, they had distribution, and it was like this big deal. There was this record store that had like a poster that said, no, they were trying to relaunch metal. They were the record companies, like, they saw these bands that were rising in the late 80s, early 90s, like the grindcore and death metal, Godflesh, all these bands. All great bands, by the way, all fucking terrific bands. They released their more like sort of commercial-ish albums, I guess you would say, Heartwork and Wolverine Blues. I thought that was an EP, but Fear, Emptiness, Despair. A lot of these albums that came out, which I like all those albums, to be honest with you. The one I don't like as much is Carcass's. What was it called? Swan Song wasn't as good, but still has some gems on it. So that's what happened. And then 94 came around, and I think that was Fear, Emptiness, Despair was 94, if I remember correctly. But you had these other bands that were coming out, like Fear Factory, Machine Head, and Pantera was big, and Propane, and all these bands. And it was like, there was obviously a divergence, because there was these kids that, like, I would tell, we talk about metal. Oh, like, I don't like death metal, but I love Fear Factory, man. Well, Iron Maiden's just like they're like hard rock. This one kid that I got so mad. So it's like it was already like the proto and new metal thing was happening. So that was starting to happen too. So I went to this alternative high school, and I talked about culture shock earlier, but this thing, if you were into metal there, you were basically an outcast, because this is like this punk school, punk rock, and I have a lot of things to say about this, because punk rock and metal have always been kind of, siblings that have not always gotten along. I kind of put it that, I can think of it that way, because they do have some similarities, and they do cross paths. They do collaborate as siblings, but they also have a lot of sibling rivalry as well. And that happened in the 80s too, when like hardcore punk bands and thrash bands would play shows, and skinheads would beat up the heshers, as they call it. I'll get to that in a second. Metalheads and stuff. So, and vice versa, or punks would beat up metalheads, and then DRI did the crossover album, which is like a peace offering to the metalheads and the punks, to like, oh, we're both in the same boat, man. We're both outcasts. And the tribalism of music in the 80s was horrible. And I will get to that. I'm sorry, I will get to that. I'll circle around back to that. Yeah, I actually will, though, because there's a lot of stuff to say about that. So the culture shock was pretty hardcore. So you have there was this punk girl that was in this high school. It was like, I only like the first Danzig album, but everything else is just Hesher shit or something. And Hesher was like a word that punks would use, or alternative, or, even some kids that I knew that were into techno and stuff. It was a derogatory term for metalhead. And I asked what it meant. I didn't know what it meant. See, I was naive, because I thought, I wear a Black Flag shirt, I wear a Metallica shirt. There's nothing wrong with that. Oh, it's all heavy music to me. Later on, it became heavy, quote unquote, heavy music became so like out of polite society and stuff, that people actually went into the United front as far as that goes, or not United front, but United. They were kind of united by the heavy music thing, quote unquote, later on. In this town too. Like I know of a musician that told me, "Oh man, you're into heavy music, man." It didn't matter what it was. Like he liked metal and punk and stuff. This was later on though. But at that time, if you liked metal, you were seen as like this out of date, scummy, stupid piece of trash, in essence. Probably drives a Camaro, chews tobacco, Camaro's on his lawn, listen to Metallica, and then blasting maybe Ted Nugent or something, right? And it was a totally reductive way of looking at metal, because metal had all sorts of stuff going on. Progressive metal, power metal, Slay the Dragon, fucking, But everybody thought that metal was just all, like, either about Satan or getting laid. Like, that was the stereotype people had. And of course, now as a mature adult, I don't see anything wrong with either one of those things. But talking about music, but like that's all that's all they thought it was about. They thought it was stupid. I mean, you had New York Times that had Metallica, the thinking man's metal band. It's like, well, what about Queensryche? What about Iron Maiden's various literary topics? What about all blah 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 blah? Face warning, whatever. Oh no, we can't talk. Metallica's the only thinking man's metal band out there, which is a crock of shit, of course. So, this is what had happened with this whole thing, and it was this like elitist, like smug, like I would dare say gutter punk. Like these kids, I'm sure they were kind of middle class. They looked down upon like the working class metalhead image, right? And it was just so. A lot of them were more lower middle class too, though. I mean, but it was just like this image they had. Metal was passé. It was bad. If you wore a metal shirt, you were a degenerate. Even though these people were just doing drugs like no tomorrow. And that's what makes me mad. It's like you're so much better than this because you have a different maybe you're like more politically liberal or progressive or whatever. Like, you have like a anti. Who was the president at the time? I don't know. You participated in more protests than your average metalhead or something. I don't know. I don't fucking know. I don't even remember how. Because then you had like the ravers, which were like the people that listen to techno, which I also like some techno too, strangely enough. And they looked down upon the metalheads too, and they were kind of friendly with the punks though. But it's like the ravers weren't doing really anything that like political or anything. It was more the crusty punks that gave a shit about anything at some point, So there was this attitude just prevailed in high school, and it was in the media. It was everywhere. And you had Rob Halford come out and say metal is dead. He had Bruce Dickinson sort of insinuate the same thing and do a Skunkworks project. You had all these just Iron Maiden played clubs for a while. Judas Priest, sort of the same thing, or medium-sized clubs, venues or whatever. And you had the record sales were down. Nobody, metal was just this passé fad at the time. It's almost like I don't know if anybody listening remembers Leisure Suit Larry, this 80s video game. And it's like this 40-year-old virgin disco guy in a disco leisure suit that's trying to get laid in the video game. It's like, and it's almost like a metalhead would be like the 90s version of that. And people do not, so I say that people do not appreciate how bad it was. I talk to people even like 3 or 4 years younger than me, and they just don't know. They just don't know how bad it was. Like how, it's like it was this attitude that people had about metal that was just, it was probably off base to a huge extent, but it was like, my God, it was bad. It was really bad. Like people would just, how I reacted is I stopped wearing metal shirts for a long time because I was like, oh, I got to stop wearing metal shirts because I don't fit in, I'm going to get teased and mocked and stuff. So I did get mocked at the non-alternative high school by people that were into rap. It was like, Once I was told I couldn't get, or quote, I'm just going to quote this, okay? I can't get bitches if I like metal. That's what the guy said. That's what this kid said to me. So it's like, you get mocked by anybody that listen to rap or alternative or techno or whatever. And, the goths hated metalheads and, it's all cock. They used to say these things about metal. It's all cock rock. It's all cock rock. Like they called it cock rock, like Metallica, like, and to be fair, like Load and Reload were kind of more cock rock than anything. But I was talking about they were talking about the old shit. That's this thing, or anything that sounded had any metallic parts to it. And then you had on these, because I used to do these bulletin boards, like they were proto-internet kind of chat room kind of things, and you had these like industrial fans that listened to totally like mid-90s KMFDM had all these metal guitars, but still they said, oh, heavy metal's a bunch of crap. It's like you're listening to stuff that was sampled for Slayer, you dipshit, or ripped off Slayer or whatever. And all the punks, like Henry Rollins, he did the whole thing about Venom and his Get in the Van book. Just the whole, just everything that came out then mocked 80s metal. But it didn't necessarily mock 70s metal. Because Kiss reunited and Black Sabbath reunited. Oh, we like Kiss and Black Sabbath, but Iron Maiden, that's just dated hair metal, And it was really annoying. It was really dumb. And Metallica Lars Ulrich came out, I don't know if it was 95, 96, or a little bit late, or like a year or two later. And he said, yeah, we're not metal, we're hard rock. And I'm just like, metal's in your fucking name, you dipshit. It became such a verboten thing to be. The word heavy metal was so dead that Metal Hammer UK, this magazine, and if anybody that's listening can find this issue, I would love to see it. It had an article that said perhaps we should change the name of heavy metal to hard music or something like that. I'm just like, this is the dumbest shit ever, But I was in the closet about it. So I had some new friends and stuff by the mid-90s that were into like industrial and gothic rock and some post-punk and stuff, synth pop. And I proceeded to get into some of that stuff. And it's funny because to this day, I still like a lot of that stuff too. But I definitely hid the metal. I definitely was scared of even coming, it was almost like, I'm not going to compare it it's not that bad. It was almost like being in the closet or something in a certain way. Because if you liked metal, you were an outcast. Like, not an outcast in like a scary, cool way, either, like in the 80s. Like, at least in the 80s, like, people were scared of you. Like, you weren't someone to be fucked with. But in the 90s, you were like a laughing stock. If you were into metal, you're a laughing stock. You're a relic from another time. So that was really funny because, lo and behold, we have today, which is a different era. But yeah, that was, I guess that's pretty much it for that part of it, because they would, they would throw things my way, and it was just like I had to deal with it. It was very hard as a teenager to deal with this stuff. But my tastes weren't really that broad when I was initially into metal anyways. I liked 5 or 6 bands and maybe not 5 or 6, more than that, but I really had a aversion to certain types of lyrics and stuff. But 1997 or 1998 were the pivotal years for me after high school, because I discovered a lot of the European bands and a lot of the black metal and prog, death metal, neoclassical, power metal, whatever the fuck, doom, death doom, whatever. And that was really the turning point for me to be back into metal, even in the 90s. Because what had happened was it kind of came full circle, because there was this record store that sold like industrial goth stuff, and he's like, it was like some of this like dark wave stuff had some like black metal musicians like Mortis that he did he did stuff that appealed to these goths and stuff, and people started to get into. And then there was these gothic metal bands that would play with gothic rock bands, and that was where I got the cock rock comment from it. By the way, so people are starting to get into. Some of the goths were starting to soften up the metal, and some of these people got into that stuff. So it was kind of an interesting period of time because people, and also I mentioned the gutter punks earlier. The gutter punks downtown in this town started to wear black metal shirts, starting to get into metal. I was like, fucking hypocrites, man. Just a few years ago, you would have made fun of this shit. It pissed me off, but I guess I was grateful because it's like things kind of turned back around. It's like now you can listen to music and not have to care what other people think and stuff. And it's just kind of sad because, all that whole time from 1990-ish through 97, was like just a hellish period for someone that likes metal, especially someone that doesn't like never liked groove metal or the proto new metal stuff. I never liked Korn and all this stuff. So it was kind of a tough time because that was what people got into a little bit later. So it was a dark time for metal. And I always pinpoint the year that metal really died, was really dead in the water. And that's 1995 because I think the first Korn album came out in 94, but anyways, Deftones and all that stuff. Deftones are actually not too bad, but it's like, this is like that was kind of the death knell. That was when it was at its lowest to me, that metal was just dead. But then by the late 90s, there was a renaissance. There was all these bands coming out, the leftover black metal bands from the earlier period, Norwegian period, doing all these weird albums and all these progressive things and stuff. And there was really all these prog metal bands and all these just crazy kind of different types of bands and stuff. And it was a really cool time to get back into music because I worked at this job and I just bought CDs because I was living at home for at least the first 2 years after high school, or maybe first 3. And maybe first 2 or 3. And I would just buy all these CDs. That's what I would do. And I got into all these bands. And it's like that first Hammerfall album came out, they talked about the rebirth of metal and kind of the lyrics, the time will come or whatever, that the time will come again or whatever in some of the lyrics. And I kind of fantasized about it, and it really did. It really did come back. Bruce got back together with Maiden, and they started playing bigger arenas and stuff. And people were like, but the attitude change still to this day kind of pisses me off because it's one of those things in politics too, oh, just a few days ago you said this, just a few weeks ago or months ago you thought this or you believed this. And that happened to a lot of people. I remember the first time that I really realized things had changed was when I played with this band. And we played with this other band that the bass player I was talking to was like, I love Iron Maiden, dude. It was kind of an alternative-ish band. He's like, I love Iron Maiden. Steve Harris is my favorite bass player of all time. They weren't metal, this band we played with, but he loved Iron Maiden. It's like, I realized things had turned around by then. It was like, okay, we're in a different era now. And it was more nerdy people that got into metal at that point. It's kind of funny to say that, but it's the truth. More nerdy people, more nerds. I mean, that's why prog power became a huge thing. With Blind Guardian stuff, which is one of my favorite bands, by the way. All these bands came out or got popular in America too, for the first time, like Blind Guardian, and it was kind of it was a renaissance that was bound to. I stuck around long enough for it to happen. I got mad because metal was sort of cool in my town. All of a sudden, even the critics, there are music critics that live in this town, they write for these papers and stuff. Oh, this cool band that was influenced by Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, they're playing live at this place. Let's go see them. And 10 years ago, it was all trite, old, dated hair metal bands like Iron Maiden, even though that's not hair metal, of course. But they used to say stuff that was so derogatory, and they were just so smug, so full of themselves. And now we're like, I like metal. Ooh. But the younger generations don't have to worry about this shit because I've hung around with a lot of people 10, 15 years, even 10, 15 years younger than me, and they might like, Kendrick Lamar or whatever, but they also like have a Sabaton like playlist on their whatever, on their Spotify or whatever the hell, It's like, it's not as like tribalist as it used to be too, where you listen to one kind of music. That's kind of the young people's thing now. And I miss some of that. There are hardcore metalheads still, of course. I'm not saying that there aren't, but you're more likely to meet someone that likes one or two metal bands now than you did 20 years ago when they said, "Oh yeah, I like everything except for hard rock." And Garth Brooks is my favorite, and MC Hammer or whatever. Really very old references, but I just thought it'd be funny to have those old folky references in there. So yeah, that's how it kind of went. So at this point with the metal scene, it's a lot better now. I have said things in the past about how I think metal has gotten too safe with its ideologies. And it sounds a little bad to say that, but like, it just goes along with everything the establishment likes now sometimes. Like, it's hard to explain. But, I would like to have like sometimes I fantasize about like, maybe not a new Satanic Panic. I mean, that would suck. But I'm just saying like a little bit of controversy more, a little bit of pissing off parents more, but that's kind of one of those things that I talk about once in a while, and maybe it's not a good thing to like fantasize about because it may come true. It's not a good thing necessarily, but it become too safe. I mean, but back in the 80s, you didn't expect kids or parents to bring their kids to an Ozzy show. Would have been like the weirdest thing ever to see, because this guy was scaring parents to death, But I miss some of that. I'll admit it. I'm not gonna lie. I miss some of the danger. I miss some of the fear, the fearfulness that was struck in the minds of many of the masses, the moral majority types. That would they would protest a Ozzy concert or burn records. It made it. There's a mystique to some of that era that's never going to come back, even if it's probably not something to wish for coming back. It's kind of a bad thing to happen, but it was kind of fun in a certain way. It was kind of fun to have that kind of danger. And then of course the 90s, where metal was controversial, that's ludicrous. I think that's almost worse than it being controversial, because it's like it's limp but stupid, like Beavis and Butthead, Bill and Ted, Wayne's World, what else? Airheads, yeah, fine, those are stereotypes, but it's like when everybody thinks that that's what metal is, it's just, that's why people just didn't, they didn't want to be associated with that, and because of hair metal and all this stuff. But it's like you start playing a thrashier guitar, and you try to deny it. Like, I think Soundgarden even said, "Oh, we're not metal," or whatever. Just a lot of these bands started to like deny that they were metal too. I don't think Alice in Chains ever did, but even Metallica denied that they were metal. It's really stupid, and that era needs to just go to the dustbin of history. But the Satanic Panic period, and when metal was something to be feared, it's a romanticized. I romanticized about that notion because it was kind of fun in this maybe it's a cynical thing to say, but it's just kind of, I miss that kind of danger in popular culture in general. So I don't know. When it's the nerdier kids listening to metal, it's all right, but it's a little safe too, isn't it? It's a little safe. I mean, I'm not saying we should have a Norway 2.0, Norway early 90s 2.0 with a black circle and all that, or anything like that. But I'm just, or even, just like a new Ozzy, suicide trial with a band or something, like subliminal messages and all that, Judas Priest and all. Go, look up your history, Wikipedia, or whatever, Google, or other search engines, DuckDuckGo or whatever. But, I miss some of that mystique. I miss some of that danger. Even if I don't want it to happen again, just a little edge of it would be nice. Just shake things up a little bit sometimes, just because people are too complacent sometimes, and I guess this pendulum swung too much. Like, in the 80s, you were a juvenile delinquent. You probably were arrested for things or into drugs or whatever, or dropped out of high school. I know someone that did that, not me. But you probably were known to be someone that was like that. In the 90s, you were just like out of date and out of step, and you were those things that I just mentioned, but you were like the loser at that point. You were not dangerous. You were just a loser. But in the 2000s and the 2010s and beyond, you're kind of this cool, sort of edgy nerd. But it swung to the acceptable, respectable establishment point of view in a certain way. But of course, there's still killer music. But I kind of miss that sense of danger. Like Motley Crue's gonna come get your daughters. Just things like that. Ozzy's gonna corrupt your son. It's just, I miss that. I miss some of that danger, some of that mystique. I mean, maybe a little violence. I don't know. Not violence, but just a little bit of the danger. But I think that's all I got to say. That's my rant about heavy metal in the 90s and how shitty it was and how fucking horrible it was and how it sucked and how people were awful to me and made fun of me and my friends as heshers and were just these dumbass weird. I was a weird hesher, according to one girl. A weird hesher. Fuck you. But anyways, that was how things were back then. And we're obviously not living in that era now. Thankfully, it was pretty terrible. I mean, it wasn't like living through some war or something like that, or anything is bad. But growing up in that whole thing was kind of sucky. So, I mean, that's kind of the point I was trying to make. Not to bash those people that later, whatever, they later changed, or, I saw some people I saw at metal shows and stuff, and it's kind of funny to see that they kind of became a little different about the whole genre, even though, they at one point were making fun of it or making fun of people that liked it. It's just, it is what it is, but just one of those things you want to call out, sometimes. And, well, I guess it wasn't cool at one point to like metal or say that you did. And now everybody likes a metal band. It's just like everybody likes the Misfits, or everybody likes Kiss or Iron Maiden, it seems like. But it's fine. I don't know. I forgive people for being assholes, the 90s about metal for the most part, but it's funny to look back on it and just see how bad it was and how ridiculous people acted and how immature, they acted. It's like, it's just the style of music, but that's when you're a teenager, of course. You're based upon your social status and what you believe and stuff is very important to people, but Generation X, I think, overall, or even, some of the older millennials had to face some of this kind of discrimination. I don't know what to call it. I guess it's not discrimination, but they had to face a lot of this these types of cliques in growing up and stuff, and these types of attitudes towards that style, their styles of music they liked or the subculture they were into. But that's the way it goes, and I hope you enjoyed my relegating you this tale that is all true, that I had to live through, and I'll see you on the next episode.